Welcome to First Class Fantasy. I'm Theo Gremminger, joined always by Billy Muzio. Billy, we are 1 week away from the NFL season starting up. I'm heading to Las Vegas in a couple days. I'm drafting in New York City for the NFFC tomorrow night, FFPC in a couple days in Vegas. I'm going to be missing you out there in Vegas this year, my man, but you're doing some very cool stuff with FastDraft right now.
That's right. Legally can no longer draft in tournaments, which is kind of a sad endeavor, but at the same time, it's for a good reason, right? We're creating a new platform. This FastDraft app is amazing. Within our first 3 weeks, we already eclipsed 1,000 users, which is pretty phenomenal. And we're starting to see the tournament field. There's probably going to be overlay, absolutely. But if you're a FastDraft user, I suggest playing as much as you can, because there's going to be, you're going to have way better odds because of the overlay. And that being said, if you use the promo code FirstClassFantasy, I will 2x your deposit. So, so go ahead and drop that in. You have a week to download and get playing. And if you don't have the time, we have a mode that we created called Turbo Mode. You can actually adjust your rankings and submit batch orders and see the rankings and your ownership while you're submitting those and adjust accordingly. So if you're overweight on someone, you can move them down. If you're underweight on someone, you can move them up, submit that batch order. It'll draft for you. So Theo, like for instance, if you're on your way to Vegas and you have a layover somewhere and you can play legally, you might want to submit like a max enter batch orders. You'd be good to go.
Well, give everybody the code one more time, Billy.
Code is First Class Fantasy. No spaces there. So you heard it here on First Class Fantasy. I will 2x your deposit.
Okay, so definitely get those in. Overlay is like a siren call. Overlay means the contest is not going to fill completely, which means you have better chances of winning big prizes. And Billy, we had cut day recently, so we got to adjust to it because it was a little bit, I'm not going to say uneventful, because there's always sort of a cascade effect when there's cuts in the NFL. But we didn't have like a massive name this year. But the one that's the most interesting is Samaje Perine is now a Kansas City Chief. We are seeing mixed opinions on what this does to Isaiah Pacheco. Perine is a guy who does one thing very, very well. He catches the football. 50-plus receptions in back-to-back seasons. Do you view this as something that could limit the ceiling of an Isaiah Pacheco, or do you think that it's more of an indictment on the other running backs in Kansas City?
I think it's more of an indictment on the other running backs. I did take a few targets away from Pacheco, and he moved down one spot in the running back position rankings. But what it really did was it absolutely, I had boosted up Carson Steele quite a bit because they released Prince. And we know that, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is just not that dude. And so Steele kind of jumped up the rankings for that like short week. And then we saw the Perine news, and immediately Steele kind of regressed, not all the way back down, but kind of back of that late RB 60 range. And so right now I got them both at RB 67, RB 68. And they're kind of back to back in the rankings. It's pick your poison. I think that Perine probably utilized a little bit more in the passing game than we're going to see Steele. But I think that he's still going to get a handful of rushing attempts as well, probably in the neighborhood of 50. But this is definitely something to keep our eye on as we get into the early weeks of football. But Carson Steele kind of earned his spot on this roster. I think that he'll get the first crack at the 1-2 downs as the backup to Pacheco. And then I think that Samaje Perine will probably earn his way inside of third downs and probably split those reps with Pacheco. So it definitely hurts the second and third ancillary pieces in this running back depth chart, but not as much Pacheco in my opinion.
I just think for me, it's this offense is going to score so many points. And it was a really, really sharp move for them to get a veteran back who's this good a pass catcher. I think I agree with you. I think at least for the beginning of the season, you're going to see Steele still probably with a role unchanged. But I'll say this, if Pacheco were to miss time, I do think Perine would be a useful player. I know I drafted him in like the 19th round of an FFPC main event just for that free look, Billy. You never know. Those free looks can be a little bit weird. And anybody who doesn't play FFPC or high stakes formats, basically you can insert any of the Thursday and Friday players in and out of your lineup. So Perine definitely was an interesting one. I want to talk about a couple of other situations that have changed recently. Green Bay, A.J. Dillon goes to the IR, and it's just like sort of just a news dump. We're like, oh, A.J. Dillon's on the IR. This is Marshawn Lloyd is a guy who I have an absolute ton of, and I think that's sort of the natural reaction is Marshawn Lloyd was a guy that was slipping a little bit in drafts down to like maybe the 15th round. Now you're starting to see him go where the the high-end handcuffs are going, like a little more of a 13th rounder type player. And I think we can both agree that this is a boost for Marshawn Lloyd. But I want to ask you about a deep sleeper. Your thoughts on Emmanuel Wilson? It's a backfield where LaFleur always uses 2 running backs. You have Josh Jacobs, who missed time last year. Lloyd's already been banged up. Is Emmanuel Wilson a guy you're a little bit interested in as a deep sleeper? He's in my early waiver wire column for that reason.
Yeah, actually, he got a decent bump inside of the projection, so he's eclipsing now the 40 rushing attempts inside of the math. He just eclipsed the 10 target range now in the math. Before he was kind of off the radar in that 1 to 2 to 3% rushing share. Lloyd gets the biggest boost, of course. He's now over 20% rushing share and just under 20 targets. So I do think that Josh Jacobs is going to be the main benefactor of AJ Dillon being injured, because you talk about the Dillon and what he was, I should say, I don't want to say good at, because he wasn't really that good at anything, but he was a bigger back, and they would utilize the short yardage. Jacobs is really good on 1-2 downs. Jacobs also very good in the passing game. So I think that Jacobs is probably the biggest benefactor here. He jumps inside the top 10 at the position for me now. And then you get Lloyd, who definitely bumps up way up. But I do think, to answer your question, Emmanuel Wilson is definitely worth a late round flyer, and probably a sleeper depth piece as you wait for injuries to unfold.
Yeah, definitely a guy just to keep an eye on. Like if you're using your last roster spot on a potential lottery ticket with Lloyd maybe not available in week 1, that's kind of up in the air. Wilson's the guy who's going to get worked in.
I think you're right here. So Wilson's probably going to be the most valuable, and he might be able to carve out a larger role if he's productive behind Josh Jacobs in these first 1 to 2 weeks. So Lloyd missed the IR, like you said, but that doesn't mean he's going to be here. I don't think he plays week 1. I think he's questionable right now. Week 2, I think we'll get more information that comes out, but I think Wilson has a chance to carve out a large role earlier in the season.
One person I didn't put into the show sheet, one interesting takeaway was, again, it's like all this sort of news. We talked about this the pre-show. It's just like, it just gets dumped. Like Deonta Foreman was cut. Sounds like they're bringing Deonta Foreman back. But what's interesting is Nick Chubb, of course, is going to be unavailable for at least the first month of the season. Jerome Ford is the RB1. Your interest in Pierre Strong, who you've always been sort of a Pierre Strong like stan, and now he's sort of the handcuff, unless this is a situation where it's going to be Foreman Strong in some sort of a split. To me, the way I read this is they like Pierre Strong a little bit more than maybe the market thinks.
And Pierre Strong he was really good coming out of college, and unfortunately just landed in kind of the wrong situation early in his career, kind of buried in the depth chart inside New England. And but this is a guy who, 4.37 speed. He's got 95th percentile speed score. He's got 86th percentile burst score. He's quick. He's agile. He's explosive. We saw him on 63 attempts last year with 4.6 yards per carry. He had very minimal attempts in 2022 at 10 yards per carry. Just blew up in that one huge run, pretty much. But this is a guy that I think can do it all, but he just hasn't been given the opportunity. So I like that they kept him. That, to me, it signals that he's going to be the RB2 while Chubb is down. They are going to bring back Foreman, probably going to hit the practice squad. That's pretty traditional. They cut someone, no one picks him up, pick him back up, throw him on the practice squad. So that's no news for me. So Pierre Strong jumped up pretty high in the rankings. When I say high, I mean like from no man's land to RB65. And so it's not no man's land anymore. This is now like a back that you need to have your eye on, especially late in drafts, and someone that you can handcuff, this Cleveland running game. So if you don't have Chubb, I would pick up Strong and definitely handcuff Ford. And if you don't have Ford, then I would pick up Strong and handcuff Chubb. And so like, this is one of those like 2 to 3 piece rotational backfields that we're going to see throughout the year.
And there was a time, Billy, where you and I were adding Pierre Strong on our shared team. So it's been a guy that we've kept an eye on. And so there's a lot of people watching or listening to First Class Fantasy saying, why did I listen to like 8 minutes about Samaje Perine, Carson Steele, Pierre Strong, and Emmanuel Wilson? So let's talk about a high-profile player, Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase was in street clothes yesterday. We're playing football in 1 week. Did you adjust him in the rankings? Are you getting a little nervous he's not going to play week 1?
I moved him. I removed one game from his projection. You won't see it in the rankings though, because there was such a big tier gap between Justin Jefferson and Chase for me. It was separated by about 20 fantasy points, and then there was a 20 fantasy point break between him and AJ Brown. So Jamar Chase was kind of in his own tier as wide receiver 5. And so he got closer to AJ Brown. I'd still want Jamar Chase, even if he misses one game, over AJ Brown, in my opinion. You just have more consolidated tree and less to kind of deal with at the goal line. And so I think that week 1 is in doubt. And even if he is suited up, I mean, let's face it, he hasn't practiced. Hasn't had the reps, probably gonna be a little rusty week 1. And so I'm not saying it's going to knock him for the entire season, but I definitely have concerns for his week 1 availability and production.
And in turn, we could see an outsized role for T. Higgins in week 1 with maybe some of the tertiary, not even tertiary guys that are like Andre Yoshibas, Jermaine Burton. That team's going to be in 11 personnel a ton this year. Your thoughts on not only Higgins, but also the 2 younger wide receivers in Cincy?
Yeah, I think Burton's another guy that I moved up slightly. I moved up Yoshivas as well. I think you could argue that, both these backs might be involved week 1 as well. Chase Brown and Zach Moss might be, a little bit more 2 running back sets, or a little bit more, couple more carries, a couple more targets their way. So this is definitely something we want to keep an eye on, especially when you're looking at like week 1 DFS or your starting lineups. If you have Higgins, like Higgins probably gets bumped up pretty significantly week 1 if Jamar Chase doesn't miss time.
Yeah, and they're huge favorites over the New England Patriots in week 1. That's hey, if you're looking for a defensive streamer, Cincinnati Bengals are it. They're double-digit favorites almost. It could be Drake May. New England has one of the worst offensive lines in football, and basically like all new personnel besides Mondre Stevenson at tailback. That could be a really big statement game for the Bengals right out the gate, with or without Jamar Chase. Billy, we're going to reveal our top 25 rankings. We might argue a little bit, and Billy and I might announce another bet that we just had before the show. We will be right back here at First Class Fantasy.
Hey, why do we partner with the FFPC? Because they have the widest variety of fantasy football formats, and it's the easiest place to find all types of fantasy football contests in the world. What if you want to play for high stakes? Well, they have a $6 million prize pool with their Fantasy Players Championship. They also have way too early best ball leagues that start in February, and Dynasty leagues. They have the closest thing to a liquid market for orphans that there is in all of Dynasty. And the FFPC has sponsored us for half a decade because we are actually delivering information that can help fantasy gamers, and they're generating so much interest and bringing in so many new users, casual users even. The FFPC creates a unique experience where you can both compete against the best and make money. Use promo code UNDERWORLD to get $25 off your first team. $25 off your first team at the FFPC with promo code UNDERWORLD. Go get it!
A little bit of a shout out to Josh Larkey in the Dominator, Billy. I used the wrong sound effect. So big shout out to our guy Josh Larkey, crushing it on the Dominator. And if you're an FFPC drafter, come say hello to me. I'm going to be drafting a couple of FFPC drafts on Thursday and Friday. I'm drafting with Dan Williamson for a few on by myself. Always looking forward to Vegas, and I'm going to be missing my guy Billy Muzio out there. We had a good time last year, Billy. Some year you're going to come back to Vegas, though. I know you're going to miss it a little bit this year. But let's dive right into our rankings. We're going to reveal our top 25. We're talking about PPR rankings, single QB, not our Superflex rankings. Billy, why don't you start out? Give me your top 5, then I'll give you my top 5.
Top 5.
Or you want to actually wait? You want to go backwards on this one? What's more climactic?
I say we go. Let's go backwards.
Okay, let's go backwards. You make it even a little bit more confusing for everyone. Let's start out at 25.
Devonta Smith for me. He got a slight tick down, not much, just a couple spots with the addition of Jahan Dotson, who I like actually. And unfortunately, wide receiver 3 now instead of 2 on a team. But I think that the targets could be equally as I should say he's going to have a reduction in targets, but higher efficiency, which that does take down Devonta Smith slightly in my rankings.
Okay, so 25 for me. Devonta Smith is a guy who I like and I actually have been drafting a ton on. But I guess my rankings, I didn't like kind of push him into the top 25. I'm able to get him in the 4th round sometimes. So that's a whole nother story. Is this like, of reflective ADP? Maybe it's just Freudian, but I put Davante at 27. He just missed out. 25 for me. 25 for me is the big dog, Derrick Henry. I know you're going to have him higher up in the rankings, but for me, I had him at 25. Right at that 2-3 turn would be kind of like my comfort level of drafting him. I think structurally he makes a ton of sense. I know you're a lot higher on him than I am. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on him when we get to it. But who do you have at 24?
24. Oh my God, Theo, I messed up. Can I start over?
Go
I was
ahead,
on wide receiver rankings and not my all. Oh my
okay,
God.
so ignore this, guys. So ignore the last 30 seconds. This is
just for everybody listening in. It is it was 10-11 a.m. I'm drinking coffee. I'm not drinking wine yet, so this is an honest mistake. And 25 is T. Higgins. I'm sorry, T. Higgins.
Oh, so you have T. Higgins at 25, and I'd say you are definitely much further ahead of consensus.
Yes,
than market with T. Higgins. I'd say, like, if you're a first class fantasy listener, you should be drafting T. Higgins sort of in all your drafts right now. We talked about the value that he has, especially if Chase is slower out the gate. Higgins we've been waiting on like that smash season for him. Billy, maybe you want to expand a little bit on this, why you're so bullish on him.
So first and foremost, we saw the kind of departure of Tyler Boyd. This is a big one. Tyler Boyd has always been involved in this offense, a guy that's kind of always finished into the top 50, 55 of the position. With him out, yes, they drafted Burton, but I think it's going to take a little time for the rookie to get acclimated at the NFL speed. That being said, also, we have the Jamar Chase saga that's going on. If that's, another week, this is a total points, projection. And so I do think that's going to, the biggest thing for me is contract year. So contract year, T. Higgins coming out and playing, going to want to earn a big contract. He's probably going to play lights out. We see this year in and year out all the time for people on contract years. And I think that Higgins takes a big step forward again and is going to smash ADP.
Yeah, that's been one I've definitely been trying to play catch up on a little bit. I'm going to try to cram in a little bit more T. Higgins here. I also think if you're a dynasty manager, this is a great time to trade for him because I think he's not only going to have a decent season, but you're also going to see him get a huge contract at the end of the year. The contracts that we saw for Jaylen Waddle, for Nico Collins, just should kind of tell you the market for T. Higgins, where there's going to be multiple teams vying for his services this year, or he'll just return to Cincinnati and they'll figure it out and he'll be attached to Joe Burrow. So T. Higgins, a lot of reasons to like him in Dynasty and time to play a little bit catch up in redraft. Also an interesting player to try to trade for, Billy, for leagues that have already gone down. Especially redraft leagues that allow trades. I'll say for me at 24, this is a player that I really tried to push down, but I've got Davante Adams at 24. I've actually passed up on him in drafts often, but I think realistically, he's going to get a high number of targets. He's had 3 straight years with like 165 plus targets in Vegas. That's elite. The guy's getting older, but at the end of the day, it's really hard for me to push him down based on volume, even though I think the offense is going to struggle, even though I think Brock Bowers is going to have an impact. Adams is the only player in the NFL to have 2 20-target games last year. This is about as low as I can get on Adams, even though not a guy I'm really excited about this year.
Yeah, I'm higher than you with Adams. Adams I have at 17, but I definitely can see your reasoning here. For me, the reason why he's bumped up was because we had the quarterback, competition, and Minshew won. I think that's great for Adams. The other part is that Josh Jacobs was heavily involved in the passing game, is no longer there. We'd have to see how much these backs split time inside of the receiving game, but I do think that Adams is going to have his regular share of targets and probably arguably in a better spot quarterback-wise than he was at the tail end of last year.
So who's your 24?
My 24 is Terry McLaurin.
Wow.
This was moved out after the Jahan Dotson move. I mean, yeah, there's ancillary pieces, and they added Noah Brown yesterday. But this is a guy I think that's going to see probably his second highest career target mark, arguably his first. It is going to be a run-first offense, I think, but I do think Terry McLaurin is going to be, of course, the number one target here, and he's going to have a lot of room to shine. So Terry McLaurin for me comes in 24.
I said for a while earlier in the summer that this year's DJ Moore, and you're actually projecting it like he's going to be a potential this year's DJ Moore with this ranking. So again, like T. Higgins and Terry McLaurin, you don't have to use your late second, early third round pick on these guys. But if you're going to go by, and Billy's he's not going to not going to tout himself here, but Billy's a great ranker, great projections guy, and he's basically telling you the green light is there for T. Higgins and Terry McLaurin. That's going to be a strong season for both those guys. 23 for me is Nico Collins, and I'm higher than you are in this. I've actually been drafting a lot of Stephon Diggs, Billy, in FFPCs and NFFCs because Diggs is falling into a range where I feel like he's not going to hurt me. Whereas Nico, I'm not necessarily comfortable taking him here. But I do think if one of these wide receivers in Houston has double-digit touchdown receptions this year, I think it's going to be Nico. But at the end of the day, it's weird. I rank him as the highest Houston Texans pass catcher, but I have a ton more Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs at this point, just based on value in some of these leagues. So I'm Nico at 23 overall. I know that was the guy that you had a little bit lower. Who do you have at 23? And if anything, your fade of Nico Collins is still strong, or you think he's okay to draft?
I'd like to say I'm not technically fading Collins. This is just such a tight-knit tier. I mean, we're talking about from wide receiver number 21 to wide receiver number 31. We're talking less than 7 fantasy points. And so this tier in general is kind of any man's game, in my opinion. And so Collins, I have at wide receiver 30 at the bottom of this tier. But that being said, I do have him, like you said, at the highest above all the other receivers in Houston. So we're on the same page in some regards, slightly behind your ADP, but or your rank, but we're in the same ballpark. For me, 23 comes in as Amari Cooper. And this one's, I think, I just want to kind of say this is subject to change as we find out more about Deshaun Watson and his health and what's viable. But Amari Cooper's kind of shown to be quarterback proof. We saw him actually have a lot of success with Joe Flacco. And if Watson's healthy, great. If not, if it's someone else, then I think he's going to be fine just as is. Cooper kind of always been that elite wide receiver, in my opinion, underrated in a lot of aspects. And for me, he's going to see, a ton of carries. Plus I have recent nightmares of being destroyed by him in Best Ball Mania. So I think that's maybe a little bit biasness here as well.
Yeah, and who would have known that Amari Cooper was the one you needed to advance in all those best ball formats? Absolutely incredible. What was that? Week 16 went absolutely nuts. Again, another guy that Billy is definitely ahead of market on. For me, 22 is Puka Nacua. And I'll say the reason that people might not love this ranking, but we're talking about a player who missed time in college with injuries. And I actually have flipped Cooper, Kupp, and Nacua. I know last year Nacua was well ahead of him in production, but I'm actually really buying into these reports that Kupp was playing in an exceptional amount of pain last year. Sounds like his health is closer what we saw in 2022. Dan Williamson just made me draft Cooper Kupp at the very end of a second round in an FFPC main event. So I'm also sort of talking myself into it, but I've flipped these two. And I'll say the one thing with Puka Nacua is this is a player where if Billy, if you told me AJ Brown loses 12, 15 targets this year, I'd say, okay, because AJ Brown's still going to crush because this is a guy that I've seen him do it with less targets. He also could score a ton of touchdowns. When it comes to Puka Nacua, I think he's a guy who really needs to be heavily targeted. So if his targets come in slightly and Kupp goes back to his traditional target share, I think that this is going to be a situation where Nacua is not going to give us like a potential top 5 overall wide receiver season. And when I'm drafting a wide receiver in this range, I really do want that upside. So I'm going to put Nacua probably in a range where I'm not going to see a whole lot of him in these high stakes formats. It's a combination of, I don't know if the volume's going to be there, and I'm a little worried about once an injury pops up, does it recur? I think it's back to at least a 50-50 Kupp Nacua split, and I usually can get Kupp at a more reasonable time.
I am closer to your rank than I am to ADP at Puka Nacua. Nacua comes for me as number 18. I got him and Kupp back to back, but for 22, my number 22 player is Deebo Samuel. And so he took a slight dip inside of the rankings yesterday. We have not seen Ayuk be moved. It sounds like John Lynch is going to play a little hardball with Brandon Ayuk. He said at some point he's just got to get on the field. It makes me feel like they're not going to trade him now, and they're just going to let him sit down, and they're going to just kind of make him deal with it. So I think if we found out today that Ayuk was not playing week 1, which is becoming a little bit more likely every day, then I think Deebo might take another 2 or 3 spots higher on this. If I found out that Ayuk was being traded, I think that Deebo probably, in my opinion, jumps into the top 11 at the position, or top 10 even. So there's a lot of wiggle room here for Deebo Samuel. A lot of outs, I should say, if you're a poker player. But right now, kind of the floor for me is wide receiver 16 and my number 22 player.
Yeah, and I really like Deebo as well. I had him at 29, so he just missed out on the top 25. I drafted him. I've been drafting him a ton in like the 3rd round of these drafts, though, because Billy, I think you're creating a situation where there's multiple outs for him to exceed his ADP.
Yeah.
And we know the spike weeks are there. He had like 5 weeks of 20 points or more last year with Brock Purdy. And also, I'll say that the Trent Williams, for some reason, Trent Williams missing time as well. I also like that for Deebo, because maybe a little bit more manufactured touches, and maybe a little bit for Deebo, and maybe a little less reliant on the running backs early on, at least just the pure running game. So I can always kind of make a bull case for Deebo. He's such a smash week type. I'll say for 21 for me, very on-brand player for me, and I actually think this player is going to finish as a wide receiver 1. Malik Neighbors comes in at 21 for me, so it's 2 rookies in my top 25. Spoiler alert, you can figure out the other one. He's going to be a little bit earlier. But Malik Neighbors is a guy that I'm trying to have a lot of. I think he's going to be one of the most exciting players in football. They just gave him number 1, Billy. There was a retired Giant number 1, and the family gave Neighbors permission. My sons are both getting a Malik Neighbors jersey before school starts. I think I've made that decision. That is number 1 as well.
They're going to grow up disappointed in life.
Well, this is at my household.
Being a Giants fan,
we're neutral, and I'm going to let them decide their fate in football. I'm not going to push them like the 49ers propaganda behind you with your children. I'm going to let my kids get Stars jerseys. So my sons have Mahomes.
Yeah,
Lamar Jackson,
we brand our kids with San Francisco emblems here, just
Jamar
straight
Chase.
branded.
And my son actually got a fresh Garrett Wilson jersey to wear to school on the first day. So Malik Neighbors, I'm going to get him for both. But we got Stars in this household. That's all we're doing in the Gremminger household. Who do you have, Billy? Let's drop this one. I dropped my Malik Neighbors at 21.
Shocker alert!
Where
Malik
you
Neighbors is also my 21. So we are
Billy,
in lockstep.
Billy, you like a younger player. I love it. I thought we were going to go all like 25 plus.
I mean,
That's
I'm not
awesome,
like
Billy.
you. I'm not Chris Hansen. I'm not out here, I should say I'm Chris Hansen, the predator catcher, and you're over here, with like 30 players inside the top 30 that are, 18 years or younger. And so
I like younger running backs. I got to type, guys. I got to type. But I love that, Billy. This is like a super bullish ranking for you. Where do you have him? You don't need to pull it up, but we're projecting Neighbors 150 targets, or are you ready to do that?
It's here. I'm pulling it up right now. Let me see. We got to go to the NFC East. We're going to scroll down here to the Giants, and I have Neighbors projected for 144.2. So very, very close.
I'll take it. Yeah, I think it's a perfect storm, and I love that you're in lockstep with me on Malik Neighbors. And again, this is a guy where if you're in some of these home formats, you're starting to see him in like the 4th round. I've seen him in the 2nd round a couple times in like the higher stakes FFPC and FFCs, but you're still sort of living in the 3rd. I just think that it's the exceptional upside. And when we talk about a guy that could be peaking towards the end of the season, like I think there's a chance Malik Neighbors is a 1st round pick next year in PPR redraft. I think he's going to have that sort of impact this year. So Malik Neighbors already ahead of Puka Nacua in my rankings. I mean, go figure. That's exciting. So I'll take it back to 20 overall for me, Saquon Barkley. And again, it's not a guy that I think I'm going to have a ton of, but I cannot deny the fact that I think the guy could score a ton of touchdowns in this offense. My one concern is I think for Saquon to have the type of season where he goes nuclear and helps win leagues, he's going to need to catch the football. You talk about the target competition where Devonta Smith just missed my top 25. A.J. Brown is an absolute monster. He's going to be inside my top 10. And it's just not something we've ever seen from Jalen Hurts. DeAndre Swift last year had a career low in terms of receptions, even though he had a career high in rushing yards. Like if I told you, Billy, before the season last year, DeAndre Swift would have 1,000 rushing yards, we probably would have drafted him on every team. And it just didn't happen. And I think that Kellen Moore wants to use running backs more as pass catchers than maybe the previous offensive coordinators in Philly. But I just don't think it's something that they've done. So I think that caps Saquon a little bit. He's going to run for a lot of yards. He's going to run for a good amount of touchdowns. Structurally, he makes some sense, but not a guy I have a whole lot of, because even though I rank him here at 20, I just don't necessarily see the upside for him to be in the competition for RB1 overall, top 3 running back.
I'm a little higher on Saquon than you. I mean, not crazy. I have him at number 14 overall. I'm a little bit more bullish in the passing game, not by much, but I also have him for, just higher yards per carry. This is the best offensive line he's ever had in his career. So I like Barkley a little bit more than you. So 20 for me is Jaylen Waddle. This is just an offense I like. It's a piece I want. Miami's I'm attacking for the most part. There's some pieces that we might release a bet here shortly that I am passing at ADP, but if it falls right or the build is correct, I'll take him. Jaylen Waddle, love the talent, love what he's been able to do. I've been kind of wrong on the player, his first year and when they added competition, and this is a guy now I'm kind of all in on.
I actually have him a little higher than you do. I'm glad to see that he's at 20 for you. I'm not that much higher. But for me, 19 overall is Jonathan Taylor. It's been a guy I've been fading, and ranking him 19th, I'm not going to really have a whole lot of, because he usually goes at the 1-2 turn. It doesn't matter what format it is. He's going at the 1-2 turn. And in some home leagues, I believe he was like 9th in Yahoo ADP. This is a guy where he just doesn't have the receiving upside in this offense or really in his profile. It's also a guy who's missed a great deal of time for back-to-back seasons. And Taylor could lead the NFL in rushing yards. He could challenge for the lead in rushing touchdowns, but still not finish RB1 overall, because RB1 overall, besides Taylor's season where he did it in his second year, every single year it's been a guy with like 65 or more receptions. And Taylor in this offense is just not going to happen. Not with Anthony Richardson. And then you talk about the two pathways where Taylor needs to rush for all these yards and rush for all these touchdowns. Ultimate vulture, Anthony Richardson. Richardson could potentially have more rushing touchdowns than Taylor. I wouldn't bet on it, but it's in the realm of possibilities. So that's about as high as I will get for Taylor.
I'm slightly higher than you, Taylor. I'm at 13, just because the RPO system is going to open up lanes. And we saw what Zach Moss able to do in this offense last year. I think Taylor's just far superior talent. Number 19 for me is Cooper Kupp. We've already talked about the reasons why. I'm in on those reasons why with you. I just think that this is more of a 1A, 1B situation than Kupp taking over the one spot. But these guys are back-to-back in my rankings, 19 and 18 for Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua.
Yeah, and for me, I guess this is a flag plant for me, because I'm ranking him ahead of Saquon and ahead of Jonathan Taylor, but I'm putting Travis Etienne at 18. I'm a little higher on consensus than him. You can still get him in a lot of third rounds. I think the whole argument is last year he was very reliant on touchdowns, and the yards per carry was poor, but he sort of bailed himself out with all these rushing touchdowns. I think that if you look at the previous season, his yards per carry were like a full yard higher. I think they'll come back to it. I think Jacksonville is going to be better offensively. But the reason for this is I think Etienne took a real step forward as a receiver last year out of the backfield. This is his de facto year 3, because the first year was missed with the injury. I just feel very comfortable with Travis Etienne structurally, and I think he's a strong third-round pick, especially for drafts where I start wide receiver. But I've said sort of in bold takes all season that Travis Etienne is a guy that I think scores more points than Jonathan Taylor, and I'm doubling down with this ranking. Sometimes, though, Billy, it's funny, like this is where I have him ranked, but I'll still take wide receivers ahead of him. I'm still willing to kind of read the room. If it's like a major wide receiver run, I'm willing to try to push Etienne down a little bit, but I feel comfortable having him inside my top 25. I think he's going to repeat being like a top 5 running back scorer again this year, around there.
Yeah, tight knit tier for me, but he's just outside that tier that you mentioned, the JT Saquon Barkley. I actually have Etienne as my 34th overall player, so what is that, middle round 3? But I'm probably in line with consensus here. I think that there's definitely room for him to outbeat that, but I'm not going to argue with your reasoning. I think it's sound.
And who do you have at 18?
18 for me was Puka Nacua. I mentioned it when I had Cooper Kupp back to back.
Oh, I had forgotten, since we've rattled off like 10 guys in a row here. Sorry, Billy, about my photographic memory.
Come on, Theo, get it together. Fuck
17 overall for me is Cooper Kupp. So, everything you said, everything I said with Puka Nacua, Kupp's a guy that I think he's going to be really, really strong this year. And I also think the fact that we could have a whole show about Kyron Williams being the new like punt returner in LA, them mixing in different backs. But I think this is leaning towards being a very wide receiver centric offense, maybe a little less reliant on a single running back like we saw last year. And I think that Kupp is going to eat inside the red zone. There's a universe where Cooper Kupp leads all wide receivers in touchdown catches this year. I'm getting a little bit bullish on him. I hope it doesn't burn me. You know I don't like older players at all, Billy, and he's old. But I think I feel good about having him here at 17 overall.
We're close. 17 for me is Davante Adams, mentioned earlier. So not far from your projection there. Like I mentioned earlier, I like the quarterback situation more than what it was last year, and less Josh Jacobs in the passing game, less target competition all around. I think Adams is going to be just fine.
Okay, for me at 16 overall, I'm Jaylen Waddle. So everything Billy said about Jaylen Waddle, I'll double down on. And I'll say, like, with Waddle, there's maybe no receiver that has more of a contingent upside than Waddle. If Tyreek Hill misses time, Jaylen Waddle to the moon. 3 straight years with 1,000 receiving yards. We've seen him have a 100-catch season. Like, there's just not a whole lot to dislike about Waddle. I'm extremely bullish on the Dolphins' offense, Billy, and I think Waddle's going to be – he's like an easy click right now. Whenever you're, like, at the end of the second round and you don't know who to take, just take Jaylen Waddle.
I think that's a phenomenal pick at the end of the second round. Like, he probably should honestly be, like, middle to early second round, especially with contingent upside. Like, I think there's a real argument for him to be there. For me, the number 16, people aren't going to like this as much, but I'm going to kind of give my reasoning why. Marvin Harrison Jr. here. And so slightly behind ADP, but when we look at what Puka Nacua did last year, he broke nearly every single fantasy record as a rookie, and he still came in as the wide receiver number 6. I don't think Marvin Harrison breaks every single record. I think that he has the talent to do it. But, you know, this is a quarterback who also likes to run the ball. They also have a very talented tight end. And, you know, they have other ancillary pieces that are going to be involved, where I think Puka Nacua kind of had the stars align in terms of everything for him to succeed and just kind of also exceed the expectations. But Marvin Harrison, for me, wide receiver 10, comes in my 16th overall player.
Yeah, and I don't think people are going to get angry about that. I have MHJ at 11 overall, and I'm pretty bullish on him. So 16, Billy, I don't think people are going to get that angry about that one. I think for me, it's like structurally, I want to push him up in the rankings because I think when I'm stuck at the 1-2 turn, he's a guy that makes a lot of sense for me, especially in wide receiver with the way wide receivers are flying off the board. But yeah, I don't think people are going to get annoyed at that. 15 for me, Chris Olave. I think this could finally be the Chris Olave season that we wanted last year. And you're starting to see that reflected where he's sneaking into like the late second round, sometimes early third round. But when you look at the offensive makeup of the Saints, Alvin Kamara's older. Everything sort of went his way last year. Olave, I think they're going to have to use more on, like, you have the combination of a high target total, high target share, and excessive amount of air yards. But I think this year you see a little bit more manufactured touches just to get the ball in his hands as the offensive focal point. It's just rational coaching and self-preservation for Dennis Allen to get him involved as often as possible. He's their best player on that offense, and I think he has a really, really strong year 3.
Guess who I have at 15?
Chris Olave.
Chris Olave. Oh, we're in lockstep here.
I love it.
I'm not going to repeat because I don't think we're short on time, but I don't need to repeat everything you just said because I think you definitely were spot on. I am going to throw in some hashtag Billy analysis here. I played Chris Olave on Madden 25, or I was the Saints, and I absolutely destroyed my buddy with Chris Olave. We had 250 yards and 3 touchdowns at half with Chris Olave. I was just force feeding him. It was awesome. And I'm like, man, I hope he has this type of season.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have been waiting on Olave, and it's sort of like it's funny because Olave had so much enthusiasm last year that I think there's people that still feel a little bit burned by Olave. And It's like, forget last year. It's a different situation, different coordinator. We're going to see what happens.
He was also banged up a little bit last year.
There you go. And, this offense, like, I don't know, there's some positive vibes here. And I actually think that the Taysom Hill usage is going to be very beneficial to them, where they've basically said Taysom Hill's a guy that's going to help them move the chains this year. I think there'll be more first downs, more opportunities, less 3 and outs. And Olave also gets those indoor environment games where you could just see him having those big spike weeks to really help you. They have an opening game against Carolina. That's a really fun week 1 game. Right. So, Billy, here we go. This is the one you're going to love the most. 14 overall, DeVon Achane. DeVon Achane at 14 overall. I'm sure this is about 40 spots higher than you have him. I love him. I want to make sure that the people who listen to me are getting him in the 3rd round. Again, you don't need to take him here, but he's going to be available to you often in the 3rd round. And I'm not crazy reaching, Billy. Like I've passed on him in the late 2nd a couple of times, knowing that I'm going to have exposure to him in the 3rd round. But this is a player where they only kept 4 wide receivers, Billy, because they're going to get the ball in DeVon Achane's hands. He's going to be used as a receiver. He's an exceptionally efficient runner. He has the most home run threat ability of any running back in football. And I think at the end of the day, he is going to be very, very effective this year. I think he's going to finish inside the top 6 of the running back scoring. And I want to be really bullish on him because if I'm trying to win a tournament, I'm trying to win my league playoffs, this is the kind of talent that I want to have. And we don't take zeros when he misses either, Billy. If the guy misses 2-3 weeks, I'm not going to worry about it. I have drafted a lot of Jaylen Wright as well. And there are teams where I have DeVon Achane and Jaylen Wright on the same team, Raheem Mostert and Jaylen Wright on the same team. Again, I have 3 Miami Dolphins inside my top 25. I think they're going to lead the NFL in scoring this year.
Like the Dolphins, I like Achane, and we've talked about this offseason. I'm not going to beat a dead horse. It's just it breaks down to the math for me, and it's just the math ain't mathin' with DeVon Achane. So I have him well outside the top 14. I have him at number 38. And so I mean, you could take him in the 3rd, sure, but I would not take him at that 2-3 turn like people have been. And where your ranking is, you're saying an early round 2 pick. So I think that's a little too rich for my blood. I think he's got, a lot of opportunity here. He's definitely going to be involved in the passing game, but he's going to be the wide receiver 3 on his own team. And I think that, he's going to be used sparingly inside of the rushing attack. So I think he's being overdrafted. I think he's an outstanding talent, but I just can't get him that high.
Well, we're announcing another bet live on the air. We have our big Jackson Smith and Jigba bet year 2. This year I'm at, what is it, wide receiver 33.5, wide receiver 32.5, Billy?
32.5 you said off air.
Okay, yeah. So I have JSN finishing inside the top 32. Billy says outside the top 32. We already have that bet on the record. Our new bet to announce is DeVon Achane fantasy football points versus Joe Mixon. And we'll go PPR scoring for these two guys. Head-to-head, a Billy Muzio, Theo Gremminger bet that we're going to follow all season long. I'll go with the young back. Of course, Billy goes with old man Joe Mixon against the electric and exciting DeVon Achane.
Volume, baby. Volume's king. Let's go.
Okay,
yeah, I will take that bet. And I just want to sub preface here is that Theo has never won a bet versus Billy in the last 2 years.
0 for 1. 0 for 1.
Hey, the count does not matter. You have never won a bet versus Billy.
All time.
All right, number 14 for me was Barkley. We mentioned it earlier. We don't need to go into why, but yeah, Barkley comes in right there for me at number 14, right behind Jonathan Taylor, who's 13 for me.
13 for me is Drake London. And Drake London is a guy that I'm really excited about. Billy and I have talked about him sort of all offseason, taking a big step forward. I think this could absolutely be the year. I've had pretty much Drake London and Marvin Harrison Jr. I've getting exposure to those two in the early 2nd round often in these high stakes drafts, just because they both feel right in this range. But London, to me, I think he's going to have 150 targets. And I think Darnell Mooney is not really a threat. I think he's going to be sub 100 targets. I think this offense is going to be very consolidated with their big 3, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts. And then I think you'll see Tyler Algier and Mooney get touches every week, but not necessarily be impactful guys unless there was an injury. So I think London, it's the year for him. He's an alpha. This is finally in a situation where I think he's going to thrive, and I think he makes sense where he's going at ADP.
I love it. I got him at number 12, so I got 1 spot ahead of you, and I agree with everything you said. My only kind of hesitation is the health of Kirk Cousins and how it could play out throughout the year, because if we saw...
I'll push back on you. If you get the rookie quarterback, you might actually get a higher target share with take lock. Like a lot of these guys, they hone in as the primary read with the rookie. maybe
Yeah,
push back on that.
volume would come down though. That's the only thing. I think that like they're not going to move the chains as much. I think they're probably going to be less efficient targets. But I would say that I could see the scenario where he gets honed in on because it happened last year even. But I would definitely say that I'd be a bit concerned if we didn't see Kirk Cousins all year.
Who do you have at number 13, Billy?
Jonathan Taylor. Yeah.
Okay.
And we mentioned why earlier.
Okay, so you're right on line with ADP basically with JT.
Yeah.
The number 12 for me is Jahmyr Gibbs. And Jahmyr Gibbs, this is one of my guys. Last year I was pounding the table for him. This is not a disrespect to your David Montgomery, Billy. I know David Montgomery is always the guy that you're comfortable drafting. And I think you'll see Montgomery. Not quite as effective as last year, but still an effective player to draft at his current ADP. But for me, with Jahmyr Gibbs, the reception total is going to go up. They're going to trust him more as a receiver out of the backfield. That was his MO coming out of Alabama. Exceptional receiver there. And last year, he really exceeded expectations as a runner, and he was disappointing as a receiver. I think this year you see the well-rounded nature of his game, and I think Jahmyr Gibbs is a top 5 scorer at the running back position.
Yeah, I've a little bit maybe less optimistic on Gibbs. I do think he's going to earn his money in the passing game. I got him for about 60 receptions. It's the early down work that's going to hold him back, in my opinion. That's where David Montgomery is going to dominate, I think, the touches. And I just have him, a bit lower. Montgomery, Gibbs to me comes just outside the top 30. So we're significantly different here.
The disrespect to the young dynamic year 2 backs, Jahmyr Gibbs and DeVon Achane, will not be forgotten here, Billy.
Some trepidation.
You have London at 12, right?
I do have London at 12.
Okay, so anything to add on Drake London?
No, I think we have the points for 11 for me, and this is a lot higher than ADP is Derrick Henry. I would say go back and listen to last week's First Class Fantasy. We spent probably 15 minutes on Derrick Henry. But the quick synopsis is that he's in a new RPO system. It's going to be very beneficial for him and his play style. We've seen Gus Edwards average over 5 yards a carry in this offense. Derrick Henry is a far superior back than Gus Edwards. I think we're going to see a lot more lane spread, open lanes here for Derrick Henry with this system. It's going to open up a lot of scoring opportunity. They're moving the chains more than they were in Tennessee. Love the landing spot here for Derrick Henry inside my top 12 overall, significantly higher than ADP. He has been climbing though, and I do think that he is worthy of a back end, or I should say early first round or early second round pick, back end late round first pick, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I had him lower. I had him at 25, but I can understand where you're coming from. At the end of the day, it's sort of a philosophical clash here where you haven't seen a back crack 200 carries in a Lamar Jackson offense. Gus Edwards last year was the highest. Does Derrick Henry fully impose his will on this offense? Because if he does, this is an offense that could lead the league in scoring, and you could have Derrick Henry could be the league winner. And also, backfield competition is Justice Hill right now. You've got Keaton Mitchell banged up. Rasheen Ali has been banged up. So the fact that they didn't bring in anybody else, I think, speaks volumes to just how much they love Henry. And also, they're pretty confident in Justice Hill as their handcuff there. So, there you go. Billy Muzio has a couple guys on this list that he's definitely ahead of consensus with. Derrick Henry's there. And 11 for me, Marvin Harrison Jr. Billy had him a little lower at 16. I'm a little more bullish on Harrison Jr. I've taken him at the turn before in both best ball and in redraft. I think his potential for a top 5 scoring season. I think he's got big time touchdown scoring potential. And target wise, I think he's going to get around 135, 140 targets in what should be a very good offense. Billy's high on Kyler Murray. And I'll echo Billy's what Billy just said. We dropped that episode last week with Dave Kluge and Alfredo Brown, where we gave our bold predictions for the season. That was a great episode. Really, really fun one. Highly recommend it. So, Billy, we're in our top 10 here. I'm going to have you start out. Give us your number 10 player.
Number 10 for me is Garrett Wilson. Love the fact that he finally has a quarterback. This is a guy we expected breakout last year. The quarterback situation kind of derailed it. Weapons are outside of Breece Hall are kind of to be determined. We saw Mike Williams finally get on the field, but always a factor to be banged up or miss games. Outside of that, not a lot of opportunities. So Garrett Wilson to me pretty easily into the top 10.
Yeah, and I have Garrett Wilson at 10 as well, and it feels low, Billy.
It does.
And I will say there's a gap between 11 and 10. Like this is like I feel so much more comfortable when I get that top 10 pick these days, because I think Garrett Wilson, absolute smash pick where you get him there. He could finish as wide receiver 1 overall, and you're able to get him towards the end of the first round. Reminds you a little bit of CeeDee Lamb last year, Billy.
Yeah,
a guy who's just this great value at the end of the round. So we're in lockstep on Garrett Wilson at 10. Who do you have at 9, Billy?
Number 9 is AJ Brown. Again, I talked about the tier break between him and Chase, who I have at 8. But Brown, love the Kellen Moore offense. I think it's going to benefit AJ Brown. This is an offense that I think that could go, nuclear again here in Philly in 2024. Love what they did. They've added a lot of pieces. They've changed the whole, rhythm and dynamic. And I think AJ Brown is going to be a major benefactor.
Yeah, and for me, I actually had AJ Brown one spot ahead at 8. Number 9 for me is Justin Jefferson, and it feels kind of odd going AJ Brown ahead of Justin Jefferson, but it just comes down to overall team scoring. I think the Philadelphia is going to challenge for top 3 scoring in the league. AJ Brown's going to have more touchdown opportunities. It feels really weird for me to rank Justin Jefferson at 9 overall, but he's there for me. So I have AJ at 8. Justin Jefferson at 9, but they're actually super close. And if you're disagreeing with me on this one, go ahead and flop them because they're essentially the same tier for me. Billy, who do you have at 8?
8, I got Jamar Chase in between Jefferson and AJ Brown. I don't think you don't need to, hear all the reasons why we like Jamar Chase. He's an outstanding receiver. My only trepidation is his week 1 availability right now with the contract dispute. But even if he misses this is a baked into this projection. There's a tier between these guys. So Jamar Chase kind of on an island in number 8 for me. And I think if you want to argue these 3 either way, there's no argument.
Jamar Chase for me is number 7. I actually, when the updated on the site is Breece Hall is at 7 and Chase is at 6, but I made the switch just because in the last day, because I'm a little nervous about week 1, and that matters. I don't want to start in a week 1 hole. So right now I have Jamar Chase at number 7, but I've drafted him at 6 overall in plenty of drafts. So it's, again, splitting hairs. Who do you have at number 7, Billy?
7 for me is Justin Jefferson. This just breaks down to volume. We got Hawkinson missing early in the season. We have a new quarterback that's I like Darnold more than most people do. I think he's actually going to be okay, especially with the weapons that he has. And this might be the best situation he's found himself in outside being the Niners backup. But I do think that Jefferson's going to succeed out of volume. And we've seen what he's able to do with volume. So number 7 for me, Justin Jefferson.
6 for me is Breece Hall, alpha running back. Led the league in running back receptions last year. It's going to be much better as a runner this year with the improvements in New York. I mean, he could easily be the league winner, and I'm comfortable drafting him a couple spots earlier, but it feels about right for me to put him at 6.
I'm slightly higher at Breece. I got him at 4 overall, but I got Bijan at 6 overall right now. I think Tyler Algier is definitely going to be involved, and that's what that break is for me in terms of separating Breece and Bijan. They were closer, a month ago, but as we've seen reports come out of camp, Tyler Algier is going to see about 40% of the work. Bijan about 60% of the work, which is what I had it projected for, and that's why I have Bijan at number 6 and not number 4.
And it's splitting hairs because I have Bijan at number 5, Billy. I think we're both like in lockstep. We like both of these guys. I just happen to think Bijan it's more indoor environments. I think that I trust the Atlanta offense a little bit more than I trust the Jets offense. That's really it. They're both great draft picks.
Number 5 for me is Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, this is the sun god. I mean, we're going to see probably an actual uptick in volume this year with some departures inside the receiving game. And Amon-Ra St. Brown is just as good as a bet to finish as the wide receiver 1 overall as anybody. So love Amon-Ra St. Brown. Yeah,
and last year we pounded the table for you to draft Amon-Ra St. Brown all offseason long. We were very right on that one. We had tons of second-round Amon-Ra St. Brown exposure last year. He averaged over 20 points per game. This could be his Antonio Brown season, Billy. I have him at 4 overall, so I'm right in lockstep with you. Extremely bullish on Amon-Ra. I think he's going to absolutely crush this year.
Mentioned earlier, Breece Hall's my number 4. It just breaks down to his involvement in the passing game. They're down weapons. I think he's going to dominate touches in the backfield as well. This is a bell cow back, and in an era where bell cow backs are not that easily found, and so Breece Hall for me really close to Christian McCaffrey actually in the projections this year.
Yeah, and for me, number 3 overall, and the bold predictions last week, I did say that I think that the younger backs are going to finish ahead of Christian McCaffrey. I do have trepidations on him this year with Trent Williams, the age. I don't love betting on older running backs, but I have to have him at 3. It's about as low as I can get on him. Billy, the guy's just a weapon of mass destruction when he's on the field. So what are you going to do? I gotta have your guy Christian McCaffrey at 3.
CMC is number 2 for me. Number 3 for me is Tyreek Hill. This is the guy that's had, just monster back-to-back seasons. I think he's got another one in him at least. Love the offense, love the speed they have. Tyreek Hill, pretty easy. I think you can make an argument for Tyreek, CMC, and Lamb all going at the 101 pretty easily.
Yeah, and the number 2 overall for me is Tyreek Hill. Unbelievable. This could be his season where he gets over 2,000 receiving yards. Unbelievable what he's done the last 2 years. I think the only pushback I would say is the teammate competition. There's multiple running backs to feed. Jaylen Waddle healthy, but at the end of the day, nobody schemes better for Tyreek Hill. Like Mike McDaniel's perfect fit. Tyreek Hill for me is number 2.
Okay, number 1 for me, CeeDee Lamb. Sounds like we're in lockstep here. I had him dinged until the contract dispute. I actually had him at number 3, and I had Tyreek ahead of Lamb, but contract dispute settled. Lamb's back on the field. Things are golden inside of Dallas. Lamb back at the top position for me, number 1.
Yeah, it's CeeDee Lamb. And I've said on another show that I think he actually breaks the record for targets. CeeDee Lamb put on weight this offseason, and he calls it his body armor. The guy's been working out nonstop. I think that he knows that this is going to be the season where he has to get the number of touches he saw post bye week. That's going to be every single week. He's preparing himself. And usually you don't love when guys say they put on weight. It's always like hey, was it good weight? With CeeDee Lamb, we know it's good weight. This is a guy that's honed on his craft, unbelievable player. And I think we see 200 targets, Billy. 200 targets.
It's a bit steep.
It's a bit steep. It's a bit steep.
Closer to the 170 range, but yeah, I mean, sure, why not?
We'll take it. We're not complaining about 170. So this was a lot of fun. We're going to try to get in one more First Class Fantasy together before the season starts. And you might have a fill-in host while I'm in Las Vegas next week. We'll announce that as well. Yeah, this was a lot of fun, Billy. We've had we had a really fun offseason here at First Class Fantasy. Really excited for the season to start. Let everybody know where they can find your work.
Yep. Over here at Player Profiler, doing all the rankings, projections. Also, you can find us at FastDraft. That's fastdraft.app. And you can download the app on your Google or Android store. Use the promo code FirstClassFantasy, all one word right there for you, for a 2x deposit match. And we are excited to see you start drafting over at FastDraft.
Yeah, and let us know in the comments, whose rankings did you like better, Theo's or Billy's? And if you want to get Billy's in-season rankings, the guys finished number 1 at Fantasy Pros. You had another top 5 finish at Fantasy Pros in the contest. Sign up. This is one of the great things about our site is the rankings that we have. You also get access to our Dynasty rankings. You can use the code Theo or the code Billy. Either one of those works. Gets you a little bit of money off for our all-in package. We're going to crush it this season. Stick with us every week here at First Class Fantasy, and we hope you crush your leagues as well.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.